Okay, while we lived at Donington, my mother came over and she would stay with us a lot, spend the night. And she always spent the night with us on Halloween. And she loved to sit out on the porch with us to give out candy. And Ben and Peggy and the kids lived in Great Bridge, not far from us. So they would usually always bring the kids over after they trick-or-treated so we could give them candy and see them in their costumes. And Mother would always spend Christmas Eve with us, so she could be there with us Christmas morning. We could open up presents and stuff together. And one Easter, I forget the year, but I invited her and Aunt Snooky to come over for Easter dinner, and Aunt Snooky said she didn't want to come. So Mother came and spent the night, and then we got the call the next day that Aunt Snooky had passed away. And then Paul's mother, Reva, passed away the very next day. They passed away at the same time. And when I had told Amy about Aunt Snooky, she said, I'm flying up. And I said, well, you can't always fly up for every funeral, honey, when you live in Florida. I understand that. But it was, she was determined to fly up that day or, the next day. And then come to find out, and my mother-in-law passed away. So it ended up being a good idea, a good thing that she flew up. She could be there for her grandmother's funeral. So there for both of them, actually. But anyway, so like I said, Butch was going to ODU and working. Paul was retired. He retired in 98, I think it was, or 96. And maybe 96. In 98, Amy had Joey. She came up here and we gave her a baby shower, and we went down there for a baby shower, and we were down there for her ultrasound. And when she found out she was having a boy, so that was exciting. And then, so we were waiting for him to be born, and I was going to take 2 weeks leave, and I had told him at work, I was on alert for whenever she was going to have the baby, and then she was late, and then they were going to induce her. And so we had planned to go down there for that and be there. And then she called me like 2 days before they were planning on doing it. And she said, they have an opening, Mother, and they want to go ahead and induce me. And I was like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Well, yeah, I guess I want to go ahead and do it. And I'm like, okay, I'll be there as soon as I can. And I'm at work. So I hung up and I called Paul and said, go home. I'm on my way. We're packing the car. We're going to Florida. She's going to have the baby. And I told everybody at work, I'm gone. So we raced. Paul was getting an oil change. They had the car up on the lift. He said, get it down. I'm going to Florida. So got the car down. We raced home. We had everything packed. We filled the car up. We raced. This was in the middle of the day maybe. So it takes about 15 hours to drive there. So we're going full speed, as fast as we can get there. And as soon as we got into Tallahassee off the interstate and on our way to the hospital, the phone rang. So I knew she'd had it. I don't know, it was 3 or 4 in the morning. And I answered the phone and she was like, Mama, where are you? I said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. So anyway, so she'd had the baby. We missed it. But we got there and got to see him and got to be with her. And we stayed two weeks and got to be there in the beginning of Joey's life. It was so wonderful. So that was great. And then that was in 98. Butch graduated, I guess he graduated ODU in 97, I think it was. Pretty sure. And he was still living with us, and but he was a grown man. He was old by that time. He was taking care of himself. That's right. And then he had a friend at Circuit City named Dave. And Dave was going to marry his girlfriend, Sarah. And I think the wedding was going to be up in Richmond. And he told Butch that Sarah had a friend that he just thought Butch would really like. And so Butch didn't want to go to the wedding by himself. He actually asked his cousin Tracy to go up there with him. And so Butch took Tracy to the wedding. And at the wedding, he met the love of his life, Shawn. She was one of Sarah's best friends and a bridesmaid. And so they hit it off. And then she lived in Northern Virginia, and he would go up there and visit her. And then they kind of had a little breakup. But then when her father died of embolism on his brain, I believe it was. Anyway, he went and talked to her, and then they got back together. So he didn't really I think he did meet her father once when he was going up there, but he didn't really get to know her father that well. He passed. So then they decided they were going to get married, and her mother was retiring, and they decided when Butch and Sean got married that her mother and her sister would move down to this area from Northern Virginia. So Butch and Sean got married in 2001, and so Amy had flown in for the wedding. It was going to be up in Northern Virginia, and she flew in, and she wanted to go. My mother at that time was in a nursing home, had been in a nursing home about 4 months, and we didn't go see her that night because it was late when Amy came in. They'd lost her luggage. We had to wait for it to come in, be delivered and stuff. So the next morning we left, and we were going up to be up at up in Northern Virginia for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We were in charge of the rehearsal dinner, which was going to be Friday night, and then the wedding Saturday, and then they were having a breakfast Sunday morning. Anyway, so we were going up for all that, and as we're driving up there, Phyllis called to tell us that my mother had passed. So Amy was very upset that she didn't get to go see her. But at any rate, we decided that Mother wanted to be at the wedding, and that was the only way she could be there. So we had to continue on. We had to go to the wedding. We had things to do. So Phyllis and Ben, we'd already planned Mother's funeral, and Phyllis and Ben made the calls, and Phyllis called the preacher and some of the family to get them to make calls, and the funeral home to pick up her body, and then Ben and Phyllis had to go to the nursing home where Mother was and get all of her belongings and take them home, and then they had to pack and get up to the rehearsal dinner. Ben needed to be there for the rehearsal. He was in the wedding. So we got there, and it was a very emotional weekend, but we got through it. It was a wonderful rehearsal dinner and rehearsal, a beautiful wedding the next day. And then Phyllis had told the funeral home that we would have visitation on Monday night, so that's what we did. We all went to a breakfast at the hotel with Butch and them Sunday, and then they had to leave to go on their honeymoon. And it was hard for Butch, but he knew he had to go. He had a wedding, he had a honeymoon to go to that was all planned. So anyway, they left, and we came home, and we had my mother's visitation and her funeral the next day. So what a weekend. And 2001 turned out to be a heck of a year because 9/11 happened in September. And, the planes destroyed the Twin Towers and hit the Capitol building and everything. The Pentagon. And then the one that crashed in Pennsylvania. So that was quite a year. And I had started taking girl trips with Phyllis and Jerry and Dorinda in 1985. Paul used to do a lot of golfing and go on a lot of golf trips. And I always wanted to go to New York City and see a Broadway play. And in 85, Paul said, why don't you go? Why don't you get some girls and go? Because he had no interest in seeing a play. And I thought, that would be very dangerous to go to New York City without a man. But my want to go overrode my fear, and so I called Jerry, and she said, heck yeah. And I called Dorinda, and she said, oh yeah. And I called Phyllis, and she said, no way. No way am I going without a man. And I said, well, we'll miss you. And the next day she called me back and she said, somebody's got to watch out for you idiots, so I'm coming. Because I think she had been to New York with LD on several occasions, just riding up there and stuff. But anyway, so we took our first girl trip in 85. And we flew to New York City. Well, actually flew into Jersey. And we went to see A Chorus Line, our very first play. We had like second row seats. we walked out of there and went to Sardi's for dinner, and John Forsythe was sitting there eating dinner back when he was starring on Dynasty. And Phyllis, her mouth dropped open, and I could hardly get her to walk to our table, but you can't mess with them in there. But anyway, so we've done several girl trips. Not always me and Phyllis, not always Dorinda, Jerry. We've had Josephine went with us, Sean Rosenall went with us, Pat Drew went with us, and sometimes it was Josephine and Jerry, sometimes it was Josephine and Dorinda. And then Phyllis and I started doing Vegas trips with Jerry and Sean. And the first time I called, Sean went to Vegas a lot, her and her husband. And so when she asked Phyllis to go, and Phyllis asked me, and I asked Jerry. And Jerry, back then, I don't remember the year of our first Vegas trip, but she said, I'm really not that much of a gambler. She said, I don't know. And I said, well, we're going to shop and go to some shows and whatever, do other things. Come on and go. So she came. Well, she got hooked, so she is very much a gambler now. We love to play the slot machine. We went there one year and we're checking in, and she goes, can I go play? Can I go play now? I'm like, no, you can't go play. We're going to get our room first and put our luggage away, and then you can go play. But anyway, the reason I was saying that is in 2001, we had already booked a New York trip for December of that year. So just a couple months after the tragedy of 9/11. And my daughter-in-law is very sweet, was very upset that I was going to be flying to New York. She just was scared to death that something was going to happen to me. And she cried, bless her heart. But I said, hey, this is the very safest time anybody could possibly fly, because, everything was on high alert back then. And so we did, me and Phyllis, and I think Jerry and Dorinda went that year. And that was very emotional. We actually went to the crash site of the Twin Fountains. We watched Twin Towers. I said Twin Fountains, Twin Towers. And of course they had it all fenced around, but we could see some of it. It was awful, yeah. But we did that, and we did some plays, and we had a nice trip. But anyway, and so then I guess the next big event was Aubrey Lee was born. And so, Sean got pregnant, and they had their first baby, and she was born in 03. I think 03. She's 1904. She was born in 04. She just turned 19. So that also happened at Donington, so that was cool. But anyway, beautiful little girl. She was, healthy and strong. That all went well. Amy would always come up for events like that as much as she could. She misses being away from the family for all the big events, so she tries to get up for as many as possible. And Joey, he was so sweet. I always talked to him on the phone, even when he was a baby. I'd have Amy put the phone to his ear so he would know my voice. And, a lot of times when babies are little and you don't see them for 6 months, they don't want nothing to do with you. But he always came to me. I think he knew my voice. So he was always good about coming to me and wasn't never scared of us or anything. But anyway, so then Paul was like, well, we need to sell Donington. The kids are gone, and, my plan was to sell this house and take the cash out of it and buy something smaller so we wouldn't have a house payment, so we could travel and enjoy life. And I was like, well, I really hate to sell it. I love this house. I'd picked out everything. There'd been so many memories there. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? Pay a house payment or travel? That's how I think I'd rather travel. So we started looking at these little teeny condominiums, and I just couldn't deal with them. They were just too little. So one day he said, we were out Virginia Beach, and he saw a sign or had read in the paper or something about a townhouse. And we went over and looked at it, and it was on Mulligan Drive near the Kempsville Golf Course. and it was a 2-story townhouse. It was a 5 townhouse building, and the one that was for sale was in the middle. No, ours was a 3. Yeah. No? Maybe a 4. Anyway, we weren't on either end. We were in the middle. But we went and looked at it, and it had things that reminded me of Donington. It had kind of like the same tile in the bathrooms. It had 2 master bedrooms upstairs, 2 baths, and it had a small living room and a dining room and a small kitchen and a little other front room that we could use for an office and a half bath downstairs. And and a deck on the back and a small, little small yard. It was fenced in. I said, well, I think I could live here. And he said, don't say it twice. All right, I said it twice. So we bought it. It was $160,000, and we had enough. We sold Donington, and we had enough cash to pay cash for the townhouse. So we didn't have any house payments. So I did skip another important part of our life. Back in 2003, before Aubrey was born, Paul had been talking to his friend Eddie. He used to go down. He got Eddie a job in Florida, and of course he loved to golf, and he would go down there and stay with Eddie, by himself at first, and then with his wife, and then with his kids and his dogs, and he would go stay with them, for about a week or so and golf down there. And Eddie got him free golf. And one day he was talking to Eddie, and Eddie said, well, they're selling at the golf course that he was working at the time. They were selling, he said, little condos for $20,000. And Paul said, I think I'll go down there and look, maybe I'll buy one so we'll have a place to stay down there. And I said, okay. So he went down there, and it ended up being a room with a kitchenette. A bedroom and a kitchenette was really all it was. There was no living room or anything to it. And he was tempted, and then the realtor told him it was like a $300 a month condo fee. And what do you get for that? Oh, nothing. Outside maintenance, Do you get to go to the pool? No. Do you get to go to the golf course? No. So he said no, he wasn't going to do that. So he went golfing that day, and he was talking to somebody about it, and the guy said, well, I live in the cheapest place in Florida, the best place, a place called Twin Fountains. It's a mobile home park, 55 and over. We buy the mobile home. You also buy the land. And I think the rent back then, the lot rent, or not the lot rent, but the maintenance was $48 a month. So Paul went over there and looked around, and there was only one place for sale. And the guy had already put it up to the realtor, and so he talked to him, and he said, well, if you get it out of the realtor's hands, call me. And he gave his number to a couple other people and said, if something comes up, call me. I think I'd be interested in buying in here. And he came home like the next afternoon, and then he got a call from a lady who said her mother had passed away, and somebody had given her our name. And she was interested in selling her mother's mobile home for I think $25,000 is what she wanted. I was like, well, a whole house for $25 compared to a bedroom for $20. This might be good. So he made arrangements. He went back down the very next day, and he saw it. And the funny thing is that most of the mobile homes in that park, snowbirds live there or full-time people. But when the snowbirds sell, they sell the house completely furnished with everything because they don't need it. They've already got a home. Well, this lady's daughter lived close by, so she had taken everything out of the mobile home. There was nothing there, but it was a hot tub in the screen room. It was a 2-bedroom with an extra room on the side and 2 baths. And inside the house, she'd left a chair and a little light, a lamp, a tall lamp and a chair. Anyway, they talked about it, and then she agreed to sell it to us for $22,500, I believe it was. So we bought it, and I'm sorry, I have to scratch my nose. But anyway, so he went and got arrangements made with the bank, and then we went down there. We bought a couple mattresses and put on just on the floor, and Amy and Joel and Joey came over and looked at it with, Joey was little. But anyway, they brought him, and they stayed there with us and for the night and saw it. And then we went to the bank and did the paperwork. And so we knew we weren't going to be able to be snowbirds at that point. I was still working. And Eddie's sister was looking for a place to rent, Marilyn. So we told her we would rent it to her, at a pretty good price, as long as the master bedroom and bath remained ours. We would put a bed in there and our stuff, and she wasn't to go in there or mess with that or have her company go in there. She would still have 2 bedrooms and a full bath and the kitchen and living room and everything, and she agreed. And so we rented it to her pretty cheap for a couple of years. But then we found out that she was letting her daughter and her granddaughters sleep in our bed, and they'd get in the hot tub and they'd leave beer caps in the hot tub, and she had a dog, and she wasn't a very clean person. So as much as we love Marilyn, we said, "Oh, you're out of here." So then we made her move out, and then Paul would go down there and stay a week or so at a time, and I would go for the weekend. But if I got to Florida, I wanted to go see Amy. So we'd go there, we'd stay like a weekend, and then we'd go to Amy's. But anyway, and of course, when we bought it in 2003, they said, "Oh, we never get hurricanes in here." It's in Lake Wales, 45 miles southwest of Disney World, middle of the state. And in 2004, we got hit by 3 hurricanes, including Charlie, and it tore it up. And we got an insurance check for about $19,000, which was almost as much as we paid for it. But we got the repairs done, and we finished paying the trailer off, so that worked out. Anyway, so like I said, Aubrey was born in 2004, and when she was an infant, we bought Mulligan Drive, the townhouse, and moved. Amy wanted some of the furniture. We were getting rid of a lot of stuff. We were moving from a 4-bedroom house into a little 2-bedroom townhouse. So before we moved in, the Christmas before we moved in, we planned to take a trailer. Paul had borrowed Tommy Tice's open trailer, and Daniel came over Christmas night and helped Paul pack it. We were taking Amy the living room suit and a bedroom suit. And they packed it up, and they wrapped it really good, and we got up the next morning to a snowstorm. And here we had an open trailer we were hauling to Florida. So that was an interesting trip. It snowed probably all the way through South Carolina. We had to go really slow, and getting off to get food was interesting, with the trailer and everything. But when we got it to Amy's, and it was a long, long trip, there was only one little corner, I think, of one of the pieces of furniture that got wet, which was amazing considering all the snow and the slush and everything we drove through. But anyway, when they had first gone to Florida, Joel worked Pepsi-Cola, and then he got a job with the state of Florida. Amy's been working with the state of Florida the whole time. She worked for the library division and then moved to the insurance division, which she's still there. When Butch and Sean got married, they bought a house that Jerry had. Jerry was doing flips at the time, flipping houses, and she found one in Greenbrier that she bought, and they bought it, and it was awful looking, but she flipped it, and that was great, and that's where Aubrey was born. And then eventually they sold that and bought a house in Deep Creek. And then Autumn was born in 2007. So I kept Aubrey when Sean was in the hospital having Autumn. We were living at Donington, and I was still working. And then, we took our first cruise in 2003. Butch and Sean were going to take a cruise, and Peggy and Tracy were going with them, and Donna and Anita. And they asked us, and we asked Chuck and Jerry. So that group went out on a Royal Caribbean cruise in 2003. We had a wonderful time. Paul was a little bit leery of going, but I talked him into it, and he loved it. We went out of Miami. He was worried about being seasick, and he did use the patch, but, the ship was just smooth as glass. And he loved the fine dining, and we had a wonderful waiter named Murat. We still remember his name. And Paul was sick one night, and I went to the dining room, and he said, "Oh, where's Mr. Paul?" And I said, "Can I get something sent to him or something in his room to eat?" He said, "I'll take care of it." So he sent a bunch of food to the cabin for me, and that was very nice. Anyway, we went to Jamaica and we climbed Dun River Falls on that cruise. Had a wonderful time doing that. It was me and Jerry, Paul, Butch, Sean, and Tracy. Nobody else went. But anyway, we had a good time. It was scary but fun. We walked down the steps to the bottom of the falls, and then you look up them, and it's big rocks and stuff. And I said, "Oh, I don't think I'm going to do this." And the guide with us said, "Oh, it's good." And he grabbed my hand and started dragging me up. So I did it. And I'm glad he did. So it was fun. I don't remember where else we went on that trip. That's the one excursion. And we've done lots of cruises since then. I think Paul's done about 8 and I've done about 12. And we've enjoyed them. We've had a good time. We've cruised with Ben and Amber. We cruised with Buddy and Barbara one time, but probably with Ben and Amber the most. We were with them one time. We went to Tampa, and Paul and I did the Love and Marriage show. Ben talked us into it, and that was kind of fun. And we became celebrities on the ship because they filmed the show and then they show it on the TV nonstop. And we won. We won, and we won a set of bamboo cotton sheets, and we were going into Grand Cayman, so they gave us a gift certificate to go to the shop and pick out the size and color that we needed. So that was cool. That was also a very interesting cruise because when we got back home, we had already sold the townhouse. By that time, Paul had had back surgery and decided he couldn't do the steps because it was 2-story. And we were looking for a 1-story. So Jerry had taken us looking around for houses, and we bought one that was a teetotal wreck over on Chownings Drive. But we found a guy to fix it, Daniel Spivey, who had done some work for us at the townhouse, and he and his friend, they were taking over the whole reconstruction. We had another guy before them that did the roof, but anyway. So we were in the middle of that house getting done, and we'd sold the townhouse, and things were going along when we went on the cruise, but we had not cut the water off that trip. Usually when we left for a week or two, we always cut the water off. Well, we didn't that time. And that was a big mistake because when we came home, we had a flooded townhouse. And most of our furniture was ruined. The townhouse was a mess. It was a disaster. We got home at like 3 a.m. to running water. Anyway, it was a real mess. But we stayed in a hotel for 6 weeks. Because we owned 3 houses at the time and couldn't live at any of them. Couldn't go to Florida because we had to take care of business. Couldn't live in Chownings because it wasn't finished, and definitely couldn't live in Mulligan. Anyway, the lady threatened to back out of the contract. We said, "Go ahead, we can get more money if you do," but she didn't. She got to pick out, we let her pick out all the new stuff. She got new kitchen cabinets and new paint, new doors, and we got a lot of new furniture out of the deal. We had State Farm insurance, and they treated us really good. So that was in 2012. So eventually, I liked living in the hotel. I thought that might just be the way to go. 6 weeks and no cooking. We ate out and had to go to the laundromat, but it was fine.
Probably got a minute and a half before it stops.
Okay. So... but eventually we did get into the house on Chownings Drive.
Talk about your biggest cruise you've ever done.
The biggest cruise I ever did? Well, Paul likes to cruise, but probably not as much as me. I've done some girls' cruises. I'll talk about that. I went on a cruise with Jerry. I won one of the slot tournaments when I was on the Hawaii cruise with Ben and Amber, which was a fantastic cruise. That was the longest one. That was a 16-day out of Long Beach and came back into Victoria, British Columbia.
Vancouver.
No. Yes. Vancouver, British Columbia. And we had 5 days across the ocean, 6 days in Hawaii and different various islands. It was so much fun. But on that cruise, I won a slot tournament, which let me get into the slot tournament on another